Alternative music, often referred to as alt-rock or simply alternative, has played a pivotal role in shaping the modern music landscape. Emerging in the 1980s, the genre defied the mainstream norms and embraced a DIY, do-it-yourself ethos that resonated with fans seeking authenticity, individuality, and a break from the polished sounds of pop music. Over the decades, alternative music has evolved into a diverse genre, blending elements of punk, indie rock, post-punk, and grunge, to name just a few. With its wide-ranging influences, alternative music has become a cornerstone of modern music, influencing generations of musicians and listeners alike. The roots of alternative music can be traced back to the late 1970s and early 1980s, when bands began experimenting with unconventional sounds, lyrics, and production techniques. These artists rejected the mainstream music industry's focus on commercial appeal and instead sought to create music that was raw, honest, and reflective of their personal experiences. One of the most notable precursors to alternative music was the post-punk movement, which emerged in the wake of punk rock's explosion in the late 1970s. Bands like Joy Division, The Cure, and Talking Heads began to explore darker, more atmospheric sounds, blending punk's rebellious energy with new wave, electronic, and art rock influences. In the 1980s, alternative music began to take shape as a distinct genre, with bands like REM and Sonic Youth leading the charge. REM's early albums, such as Murmur 1983 and Document 1987, combined jangly guitars with cryptic lyrics, capturing the essence of the alternative spirit. Sonic Youth, on the other hand, pushed the boundaries of sound with their experimental approach, incorporating dissonant guitar tunings and noise elements into their music. These bands, along with others like The Replacements and Husker Du, paved the way for what would become the alternative rock explosion of the 1990s. The 1990s are often considered the golden era of alternative music, with bands achieving mainstream success while retaining their underground roots. One of the most iconic bands to emerge from this era was Nirvana. Their 1991 album, Nevermind, featuring the anthemic single Smells Like Teen Spirit, catapulted alternative music into the global spotlight. Nirvana's grunge sound, characterized by distorted guitars, heavy riffs, and introspective lyrics, defined a generation of disillusioned youth. The success of Nirvana and the grunge movement brought bands like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains into the mainstream, forever changing the musical landscape. While grunge dominated much of the alternative scene in the early 1990s, other subgenres began to emerge as well. Indie rock, characterized by its lo-fi production and emphasis on artistic expression, gained popularity with bands like Pavement, Sebado, and Guided by Voices. These bands rejected the commercial expectations of major labels and embraced a more personal, often experimental approach to music making. At the same time, the rise of shoegaze and dream pop, led by bands like My Bloody Valentine and Cocteau Twins, introduced lush, atmospheric soundscapes that contrasted with the raw energy of grunge. As the 2000s approached, alternative music continued to evolve, embracing new technologies and sounds. The early 2000s saw the rise of the garage rock revival, with bands like The Strokes, The White Stripes, and Yeah Yeah Yeahs bringing raw, stripped-down rock and roll back into the spotlight. These bands combined the energy of punk with a modern sensibility, resulting in a fresh take on alternative music. At the same time, indie rock continued to thrive, with artists like The Shins, Arcade Fire, and Modest Mouse gaining critical acclaim and commercial success. In recent years, alternative music has further diversified, incorporating elements of electronic music, hip-hop, and pop. Artists like Tame Impala, Arctic Monkeys, and Florence the Machine have continued to push the boundaries of what alternative music can sound like. These artists blend genres seamlessly, drawing from various musical traditions to create innovative, genre-defying music. The rise of streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music has also allowed for greater exposure of independent artists, leading to a new wave of alt-pop, alt-electronic, and indie artists gaining recognition. One of the defining characteristics of alternative music is its ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining a sense of authenticity and individuality. Alternative bands and artists have always embraced diversity. creating music that reflects a wide range of influences and emotions. Whether it's the angst of grunge, the experimentation of post-punk, or the introspection of indie rock, alternative music has always provided a space for artists to explore their creative vision without being constrained by mainstream expectations. Some of the most popular bands and artists associated with the alternative genre include Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Radiohead, The Smashing Pumpkins, Beck, The Strokes, and Arcade Fire. Each of these artists brought something unique to the table, contributing to the genre's evolution and helping it to remain relevant over the years. Whether through the raw emotion of grunge, the experimental sounds of electronic-infused indie rock, or the boundary-pushing music of today's alternative scene, these artists have all played a role in shaping alternative music into what it is today. In conclusion, alternative music is a genre defined by its diversity, creativity, and rejection of mainstream conventions. From its early roots in punk and post-punk, to its evolution into the various subgenres of the 1990s and beyond, alternative music has consistently provided a platform for artists to explore new sounds, ideas, and ways of expressing themselves. Today, the genre continues to thrive, with new artists and bands pushing the boundaries of what alternative music can be. Whether it's the classic sounds of the 1990s or the experimental music of today, alternative music remains an essential part of the musical landscape, constantly evolving and challenging listeners to think outside the box.